What's going on, guys? Skyhound here, also known as Geek Detective Pierce. So, this would be considered episode 2 of Reader's Corner. So, to those of you guys joining, welcome. As I mentioned before, this is going to be a spoiler version of issue number 1 of the one shot tribute for Mighty Morphin Power Rangers The Return. Now, if you guys have already read it, then you likely know it or what already went on. If not, I will try to keep it as simple as I can. So we can, as you can see here, page 3, it kind of gives a bit of a rough summary of what's going on. That the Rangers beat Rita Repulsa and Lord Zed, and then the team broke up. However, as you can see here, it shows 5 out of 6, which means something happened to Tommy. What that is likely going to be mentioned in issue number 2. As for how they beat Rita and Lord Zed, why the Rangers went over to the moon to fight them, that's likely to be explained. So we start off here. We see a older Jason who gets into the command center. He is obviously chasing something and he knows it's around. But when he attacks, his coin is stolen and his connection to the morphing grid stopped. And he's asking this shadowy figure, "Who are you?" And here's where it gets a little interesting. We know that there's someone that is stealing the coins from another dimension. Who that is, we're not sure. Because it says here, "I am the past, come back to haunt you. I am the future." Now, one can assume it could either be Draken, but that's not likely, because it takes place more on a alternate universe, if you will. Going further, we see here a little tribute to not just the actress who played Trini, Rip Tui, but I like the art here in terms of how it shows the Rangers a bit older and how they could have been. Obviously, Billy is giving his eulogy, and then we see Zach, on stage in the back as they open a youth center in tribute to their old friend. But what they also show here on this panel is an older Kimberly. On top of that, we see a few familiar faces. We see Bulk and Skull, a little bit older, as well as Ernie. Rip to the original actor who played him. Now, before I go any further, I do want to point out that I did get a chance to inquire about, the memories of the non-Ranger actors, like the actor who played Ernie, Richard Janelle. The name escaped me for a moment. Excuse me. Richard Janelle is the guy who played Ernie from Mighty Morphin all the way to, at least to my knowledge, Turbo. But yeah, that guy was no longer with us. I did get a chance to talk with Walter E. Jones a little bit once. I got to meet him twice. And the thing was that I wanted to hear from their side, what was it like working with him? So I got the story from not just him, but also Karen Ashley, who plays Aisha, as well as Catherine Sutherland, who plays Kat. Obviously, when Austin St. John, courtesy of Fanword, did a live stream chat with the fans, I couldn't help but bring it up because, well, we all have our favorite characters as well as non-rangers. Let's be clear. But anyway, getting back to the comic here, as Billy's giving his eulogy, Zach comes in and he lets something slip. And when Kimberly gets wind of it, she's like, "Oh, great. What did you do now, Zach?" And Kimberly's like mentally reminiscing of how times were. And what's interesting here on this flashback, at least how they're doing it, Trini obviously is into martial arts, tries to teach Kim a little bit of something. This is a nice nod to Once and Always a little bit. And it may give a hint to it, but again, this is an alternate universe. So, yes and no. You could say it is giving a nice nod to it. But anyway, we see here on page 11, or at least it could be page 11, Zach knows exactly where Kimberly went. And she's telling Zach, "I'm trying to keep a low profile." But it shows that she's standing in front of a grave. What's clear here is that going back to that first page when I started, I counted 5, which means there's only one person that's showing the grave here, and that's Tommy. So Zach's trying to convince her to, hang out a little bit with Billy, and they haven't seen her for a long time. And she tells him that, "I'm no longer Kimberly. You need to call me Emma." And obviously, Zach knows that they lost a team member. So when they're talking, Kimberly obviously is annoyed with what Zach was doing with the whole reveal. And she's pointing out to him if how long would it be before everyone figures out that all of the Rangers were your friends from high school. And what's interesting here is that as they're kind of exchanging arguments, if you will, Billy and Zach point out to Kimberly like what they were doing with their powers. Zach is hosting a charity event. Billy is trying to tap into the morphing grid. And in this sense, you can sort of say it's a nice nod to Once and Always. And she's obviously asking, does Jason know what you guys are doing? But the whole reason why they brought her along is that they need to talk. And they give a little bit of a rundown what is going on with Jason. He is not only using his powers, but he's saying that he needs access more to the grid than they do. And then they find out that he's not the only one accessing it, as Billy's pointing out. And they thought it's Kim. And she finds it ridiculous because she decides to quit. But Zach and Billy are trying to present their case in terms of we need to do this one last time to help Jason. And Kim is obviously against it. But they're pointing out that they need to use her Zord, the pterodactyl, because it's the only one that can fly. But she still refuses. And what's interesting here is before I get to the end, It shows a ring, which is clear she is married. Who she's talking to, we're not entirely sure. So by the time she gets home in Canada, what I like here is a nice nod to it's not only showing that she's trying to move on, but here's where things get a little interesting. It's this last page. Trini mentioned about having a cousin. Kim, unfortunately, doesn't quite fully buy it at first. And then she's like, how is it possible that she has the morpher? And that's where it ends. Okay, so with the end of issue number one, I pretty much gave like my general thoughts in terms of what went on, how it seems to unfold. As I mentioned towards the end, I was skeptical in terms of the whole story that Kim was being given. And overall, in terms of how this is going to play out, we know that Tommy is no longer around. How that happens, I'm guessing, continues on with issue number two. And then basically, how the rest of this plays out, like who becomes yellow, who becomes green, and how this whole thing actually comes about is something that I'm actually looking forward to. Would I say that the writing is decent? Yes. Is it concise in terms of how it's trying to do this whole alternate universe type of thing? In addition to doing a tribute, from my observation, I would say yes. Now, with that being said, I'll give my general grading, if you will. Writing, at least for volume one, I'm going to say I'll give this at least a 6 or 7 out of 10. The art style, I would say, is pretty decent. I like, at least in terms of how they try to age the characters up, in terms of how they might have looked like after a certain number of years. Now, in terms of like where this is going to lead, most of us know that they kind of like spilled the beans a little bit. How it gets from point A to point B, well, we're going to have to wait until it gets to the later issues. The art style itself, at least in this case, I'm going to give this at least a 8 or 9 out of 10. As for the characterizations, in terms of how it captures these characters, from my observation, I would say at best an 8 out of 10. So, overall, in terms of issue number one, I'm going to give this at best, as a quick startup, a 7 out of 10. But yeah, this is just me, Skyhound, giving my general overall thoughts, along with some spoilers in terms of where I think this is going to go. I did recently download issue number two, since I did support the Kickstarter, and I will be going over that soon. In addition to that, I will be doing um, an early celebration review with regards to a certain manga that I remembered reading recently back in the years. And since it's going to be celebrating its 20th anniversary, I will be going over Magic Knight Rayearth with a certain YouTuber next month. So, for those of you guys who like manga and Japanese anime, look forward to that. I will be posting it in my Twitter, and I will be posting it also on my channel in terms of when it's going to be airing. So, look forward to that. But with that said, this has been Skyhound, also known as Geek Detective Pierce. Stay safe, stay sane, and as always, stay humble. May the power protect you. Peace.